Welcome to Dawah for beginners. Now, what we're going to actually cover in this video is how to give Dawah on a very elementary level. Now, what we're going to be going through is something called the GORAP technique, which stands for God's existence, oneness, revelation, and prophethood. Now, say you are giving Dawah on a high street or just somewhere, where it's busy, like a train station, right? Now, you're trying to initiate a conversation, you're trying to stop people. So you might be handing out a flyer saying, "Excuse me, sir, do you know what the purpose of life is? Excuse me, can I ask you a question? Do you believe in a creator?" So if you initiate the conversation like this and ask a non-Muslim a question, now when you ask them a question, you need to have a structure, you need to have a way to actually explain to them the concept of Islam. Now, once you ask them something like, "Do you believe in a creator? Do you believe there's a purpose of life?" Begin off a conversation, get them to, explain their belief or explain their view on purpose of life. Now, once you've built up this rapport and you've built up this sort of conversation, then you basically take it to what we believe about God's existence or about the purpose of life. And what you basically take them through is actually the GORAP technique. Now, at any time, let's just say they start asking questions about, hijab, terrorism, apostasy law, blasphemy law, so many questions about inheritance and finance and praying 5 times a day and shaking hands with the opposite gender, and there's so many questions. Whatever question they bring you, all you need to simply say is, "Thank you for your question. In order for you to understand, the answer, I need to explain to you, the foundations of Islam." And you're still going to try and take them through these steps. Now, once you've initiated the conversation and it's going, then from there you take it to a common sense agreement in which you say, "Look, for us to talk about God's existence or purpose of life or any of these things, we need to agree that we're going to use our common sense. We're not going to use blind faith or just follow our family follows, what culture says, what we feel like, but to use common sense. Do you agree with that?" And you can give them a simple example. If you're going to cross the road, are you going to cross the road blindfolded, just go across the road? Or are you going to use your mind, reflect, think, look left and right across the road? Of course, you're going to use your common sense. You use your logic. So just like with anything in life, we need to use our logic, our reasoning, not just blind faith or just doing things what we like. So once you get a common sense agreement, then you basically go through the reasons why it makes sense that a creator exists. So you could give them a very simple example. For instance, you could pick up your mobile phone and say, "This mobile phone is made of glass and it's made of plastic." Now, glass and plastic, if you smash this mobile with a hammer and you take all the pieces, and those pieces you leave on the table, and the wind comes randomly and by chance a mobile phone forms by accident, can that happen? Just ask them a simple question. They're most likely to say no. Well, actually that can never happen. A mobile phone is clearly something designed, it's clearly something which has, there's intelligence behind this. So if a mobile phone can't form together by chance, then how can the universe, which is vastly more complex than a mobile phone, form by chance? I mean, just think about it. Think about your eyesight, your mind, your body, the universe, the earth and the sun and the stars and all these things, how complex the world is compared to a mobile phone. Just like the mobile phone can't come together by chance, just like in the same way, the world can't come together by chance. So you get an agreement. Does that make sense that God exists? It makes sense that, it's not chance. There is a creator. So once you take it from God's existence, you take it to oneness. Look, it makes sense that God is one. If you have a country that has 2 or 3 different rulers, they'll be fighting each other and there'll be chaos. And the universe has so much complexity and so much order and so much patterns, It makes sense that there is one ruler, that there is one creator. And this peace and harmony is proof of that. And it makes sense the creator, is different to his creation. If I make this table, do I become into the table? Of course not. I'm different to the table. In the same way, God created us, he's different to us. We live, we die. We have a beginning, we have an end. God has no beginning, no end. We're limited in our knowledge and our power, in our thinking. We're limited in so many different ways. Allah, the God, Creator, is, He's not limited like us. So we show that, we're human beings which are needy and God is independent. So oneness, what you're showing them is, it makes sense that the Creator, Allah, is one and He's different to His creation. Once you get an agreement on oneness, then the next thing is, well, it makes sense that this Creator would send down revelation, would send down a message to mankind. I mean, just think about it. If you buy a complex camera from a superstore, and you come home and you're trying to work it out and you're not sure how you're going to work it out, what are you going to look for? You're going to look for a manual, right? You're going to look for, okay, how do I work this thing? And you're looking through the manual. Some of it's making sense, some of it's not. But you might ring up the superstore and say, this camera I bought, this big camera I bought, it doesn't, I don't really understand how it's working. So can you please explain, can you please send down an engineer to maybe explain to me how this works? So they'll send an engineer who will explain the sort of manual to you. So in the same way, if you use that example and you look at the world, God created this world, so it makes sense that He would also send down messengers with manuals, with books of guidance on what our purpose of life is and what we're exactly doing here. So it makes sense that God would send revelation. He would send a message. He would communicate to mankind via messengers and a manual. But somebody could say, well, why Islam? Why not Christianity or Buddhism or Hinduism or Shintoism or all the other isms in the world? Why Islam? And what we would explain next is that it makes sense that when God sends a revelation, when He sends messengers, when He sends a manual, He would send some form that a human being can identify that this is true, some sort of ID, some sort of proof, some sort of miracle, I guess. And when it comes to the Quran, there's various ways we can show it's a miracle. For instance, if you just look at the language, the language of the Quran is something which cannot be replicated. It has a unique structure in the way that it's formed. And also there's many things in the Quran which we didn't know 1400 years ago, which we now know in this time and age. So how is this information in the Quran 1400 years ago, for instance, about every living thing being made of water, and the different sort of way the Quran describes the embryo, and the water cycle, and all these various things about man, life, and the universe, I guess, which are mentioned in the Quran, which could not have been known 1400 years ago. And another thing, other than the linguistic miracle of the Quran and the scientific facts in the Quran, is just the Quran's message itself. How comprehensive it is, and how it has pure monotheism. It has the pure concept that there is only one God who is completely different to His creation, who's the only one worthy of worship. We don't go through Jesus, we don't go through any prophet, we don't go through graves, we don't believe in lucky charms, we don't believe in any of this. We just believe in the one Creator and we worship Him alone. Now these three things together make a powerful case for why the Quran is a miracle, and it's a book from the Creator. And once we've gone through revelation, then we need to introduce the one who the revelation came to, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to explain that his life is proof that he wasn't a liar, he wasn't deluded, he was telling the truth. A liar does things for fame, for money, for women, for all these things, and he suffered for the message that there's none worthy of worship except Allah. And so it doesn't make sense to call him a liar because he didn't benefit from the message. It doesn't make sense to say he was deluded or he was mad because the teachings that he came with weren't the teachings of a madman. They were something which led to the greatest civilization known to man. So it doesn't make sense that he was a liar or he was deluded. So it makes sense that he is telling the truth. So now we've gone through all these steps: God's existence, oneness, revelation, and prophethood. And at each step you ask the person, do you agree? And if they agree, then you move on to the next step. Now once you've got to this level, then you simply explain to them, look, your original question you asked, why we have the hijab, or why we have the beard, or why we have any of these things, or what the purpose of life is. These are all things which the Quran tells us. The Quran tells us to wear the hijab, to follow the laws of God, and that our purpose in life is to worship the Creator, and that's our purpose of life. So the Quran gives the answer to all these questions. So if you agree with everything that I've said so far, then you simply ask them, look, why don't you enter the brotherhood of Islam, this brother and sisterhood of Islam? Why don't you become Muslim? A Muslim, he prays 5 times a day, he gives charity, he does pilgrimage to Makkah if he can afford to, he fasts, and he testifies there's none worthy of worship except the Creator, and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his prophet, and after we die we have heaven, and for those who reject the message they have eternal hellfire. And this is a very serious thing to bring in the death, and how trivial this life is. And when it comes to this point, you've explained Islam to them, they might have some questions which you can try and answer. And just really say to them, look, Islam might seem difficult, but when you go to the gym, you don't pick up the heaviest weight, you go and pick up light weights, you work out, you over time build, and it's the same thing with Islam. So this, in a nutshell, is how to give street dawah to pretty much anyone. Now, we know from a narration of the Prophet ﷺ that Islam will enter every house. And we don't say inshallah on this because we know this is going to happen. And there's no doubt about this. So why don't you play your role in fulfilling this vision by giving da'wah today and inviting humanity to Islam. Jazakallah khair.